Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today, I am very excited to be chatting with Chaia Raibon. She is the Director of Social Media and Community at Hatch. Welcome, Chaia.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this.
Yay! I'm excited to talk with you and to talk through your career journey and all the good stuff. But before we jump in, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I can. I'm Chaia Raibon. I am originally from Houston, Texas, which is actually where I currently reside after living in Los Angeles for 7 years and New York in 3 years. I went to school in Washington, D.C., so I've been on all of the coasts, I would say. I haven't done Midwest just yet, but Chicago, maybe
Do you
sometime.
notice a big difference when you're in the different cities of like the energy, the people? Is it big?
Totally, totally.
Really?
LA taught me so much. New York taught me a lot. Houston raised me. So, yes, definitely. And DC is a phenomenal place to like become a woman, if you will. So,
Ooh.
yeah, growing up in DC is a different experience. You just get to learn so much about culture and the country and yourself, particularly on a campus like Howard University, where I got my degree in journalism. Yeah, and I love reading. I'm a Leo, Beyonce fan. And I love marketing. I love talking about marketing. I love encouraging young marketers. So this is like right up my alley.
Perfect. Are you seeing Beyonce in concert? I know
Yes,
she's
I
going on
am.
tour.
I'm going opening night in Los Angeles. I know. It's that serious for me.
Oh, that's gonna be amazing.
I'm super excited.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you are currently at Hatch leading social media and community. Can you tell me a little bit about what your role looks like?
Yes. As a director of social and community, I lead all of the organic social across all of our own channels. That extends also with partnerships, any of the partnerships that you see active on our social channels. I support that as well. I work really closely with our internal creative team as well as our external social agency to create assets that live across those channels as well. So a lot of concepting, strategy, and execution.
Can you tell me about the community part of your role? Because I think we like see a lot about social media, but I know right now community is a really, really big thing that brands are focusing on. And I know we'll get into your story, but relationships and community is something that's important to you. So I'd love to hear like what that was that part always on the end of your title? Did you add it there? Like kind of tell me about that.
I was actually really fortunate to be hired by Eric Pallotta. Shout out to Eric, who has a really strong social media background. So he really understood the importance of pairing organic social with community. I believe you can't have organic social without community. They kind of just go hand in hand. So that was initially a part of the role and the title, which is ultimately what attracted me to the role. I think that building community is crucial to create an atmosphere where your audience becomes part of your community and they feel engaged, they feel welcome. They want to be a part of something that you're talking about. In this case, it's sleep. We do a myriad of education pillars across all of our social channels, as well as just evergreen because everyone sleeps, right? And everyone sleeps differently. So once we start talking about that and honing in on like the different ways that we can help you create healthy habits from a branding perspective, but also just like evergreen, just like talking about sleep and having fun with it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that community should very much be tied into organic social. And I think it's really interesting with different guests I've had of seeing how community is kind of intertwined into more marketing roles now, which I think is so important. Is there a favorite maybe campaign that you've done recently or in the past, or like while your time at Hatch that you just absolutely loved?
That is such a fun question. There are a few. So we did one last month, yes, called Sleep Divorce Lawyer. So back in Houston, there is this lawyer that has these outrageous commercials. And so our creative team concepted a concept that is thematic of that type of lawyer, but it's like fast speaking and a lot of pointing and like if you've been injured, call this number. And we leveraged an insight about sleep divorce, which is essentially when couples decide to sleep in separate bedrooms.
Yes.
And, and create an asset that speaks to sleep divorce in the style of that like lawyer commercial. And it's just so funny. It tickled me so much because I love when concepts are creative, but also like really lean in on audience insights. And so we paired those two together, and ultimately landed on some really fun assets that performed on our social channels. Another one is a billboard concept, again, that came from our creative team. We really honed in on the idea that our Restore 3 product helps you with a phoneless unwind routine to get you to sleep quicker. Everyone's guilty of doom scrolling, like you're on your phone,
Yes,
you're on TikTok.
absolutely.
It's just a thing. So back in December, we did some billboards that were near like Apple ads or HBO ads in LA. And the one that pointed to the Apple ad was in Williamsburg, I believe, in Brooklyn, but I'm just trying to remember what part. I think Williamsburg. And so our it was our ad that said like has your doesn't have your ex's number, and then the arrow pointed and said like has your ex's number, and the arrow was pointing to the
Oh
Apple like
my gosh, that's so fun. So you guys had to know like where the ads were and then strategically place your billboards next to them.
so fun, so
That's
fun.
so, I don't think I've ever seen another brand do that, at least not to like that I know.
We were running a risk. I'm sure some brand may have done that,
Yeah.
maybe, but like we have like you hadn't seen something like that in a long
Yeah.
time. And so from the organic social perspective, we created a video to highlight that and instantly went viral, like instantly. People were really into it. To your point, like some people hadn't seen that before. Some people were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this reminds me of like back in the day, like when brands used to
Yeah.
openly like talk about their differences." So it was very fun for us to do. And again, it's still getting clicks and engagement, and people are reaching out like, "Oh my God, this is so fun." So more of that in 2025 for sure for us.
Yes. I think it is really fun as a consumer to see brands do stuff like that. That is just outside of like the normal stuff that you see every single brand post. Like every brand wants to be promotional, and those are like the worst brands to follow on social that are just always trying to be promotional.
Right,
So it's really fun when you see a brand be playful in that way.
for sure.
Okay, so I know you are doing incredible things over at Hatch, but you also do some really interesting freelance stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So when I have time, I've been quite busy since joining Hedge about 2 years ago. I like to take on freelance clients, whether that's social producing or building out social strategy. I really am a marketing nerd. So like I nerd out on insights. I like to like do the digging and figure out who you're talking to, where you like to talk to them, how to build your authentic community, because I think that's really the important part, right? The authentic storytelling and like plucking those out and finding ways to execute that for small brands, big brands, like one-off projects. It really, I don't, I don't have a favorite. I like to do it all because again, I just like to nerd out on it. So yeah, when I have the time,
I
I
love
will
that.
dip my toe into some freelance work.
Can you tell me about authentic community building? Because, like I said, I feel like community has almost become a buzzword now. Like, almost like I feel like I hear AI and community. Those are the things I'm hearing all of the
No,
time.
really, yeah.
Really. And
That's
short
it.
form video or not, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
But I really do think, like, I just think of Sky Society, like, all of our growth has been organic community driven. But it wasn't anything I maybe knew a lot about when I started. I'm still learning so much about it, but I really do think that brands that win on social, they build community and it does feel authentic. Like, I think that's like such a great way to talk about it. So can you tell me a little bit about what your perspective of authentic community is?
Absolutely. I would say build it and they will come. I think far too, like, especially with early social, people were so like, oh, if you don't have this many followers, like, you that shows that you're not a great brand or like that you have no motion like on the web and all that type of things. But like if you really focus on building something that you feel that is a reaching the audience that you intend for it to reach, they will come. They will follow you, they will engage. For me, engagement is more important than follower count. And when I say engagement, I mean are people sharing? Are they commenting? Are they saving? Like are they finding the the content that we're putting out valuable, or are we just doing content for content's sake? So for example, like with the sleep blower asset, like that was fun and it was engaging and people thought it was funny, so they were engaging with it. But if they hadn't, would have taken the note of like, okay, we tried something, we tested it, we learned, and we will pivot and try to find something else and another way to again get people within our community. I think again, when you're just being authentic to who you are as a brand, they will come. Like just decide, work closely, social folks, work closely with your brand leads and decide who you are. And then ultimately, as the social lead, decide how who you are shows up on social. Because maybe you don't show up as like your full self on social. Maybe there's a portion of who you are that shows up on the social accounts. It's like we're this person, but we take this segment of the personality, and that's how it shows up on social. And then you lean
Mhm.
in on that. And maybe, and I think often when you're trying to create an authentic community, that's how you'll identify your people because your audience doesn't necessarily match the audience of the grander business. It's something that I've tried and tested time and time before, and that stays the same
Yeah.
at any role that I've ever done.
But I feel like that's so true because like the brands that have really strong brand identities are the ones that their voice is so clear on social because they're not trying to be a million different things. They're and it's so clear, right? And that's why I feel like you also build relationships with them because they feel less like this like massive big company and they feel a lot more relatable when you hone in on something specific.
Absolutely.
Um, how about when it comes to social like content strategies for so for example like a lot of especially younger women right you're maybe working like in the depths within social media so how do you kind of incorporate this community perspective and like you kind of said like don't just post content for content's sake which I feel like is a big mistake of like you want to post things just because they look cute or you want to or again brands just post stuff that's like maybe sometimes too promotional so how do you kind of balance that with content strategy.
Yeah, I think just being really clear about your pillars. I'm old school in that way. I've talked to some younger strategists who are like, oh, pillars, this and that. But I'm like, it helps me. It helps me formulate my thoughts when I'm thinking again about like the larger strategy and like how I get that in front of my creatives when building a strategy. Just saying like, hey, okay, these are our different pillars. This is my intention with this pillar. This is my intention with this pillar. This is my intention with this pillar. And then giving creatives the ability to brainstorm on like the content and ultimately how like they see it come into life. As long as it ladders back up to my strategy, like I'm pretty free when it comes to content creation. Like I really want people to who work with me to feel like their art is being able to be showcased, but just through the funnel of a strategy.
Yeah, yeah. I love content pillars too, so I guess I'm old school.
Yeah, some people are getting rid of content calendars. They're not doing pillars anymore. I'm
Oh
like,
my
we use the
God.
recipes, but whatever
I also
works.
feel like pillars just help when you are, because I think just often there's like I guess that maybe they want to remove them so there's like more freedom, but I feel like you can still have freedom within pillars because they can be broad.
They can be super broad. But again,
Yeah,
back to like the content for content's sake. Like if you don't have the pillar, then like you're just making it because you thought it
yeah,
was cool.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so now with Hatch, like your work is within the health and wellness space. So can you talk to me about like where this passion for working in health came?
Absolutely. I will say early in my career, I had just graduated my degrees in journalism. At the time, journalism market was like a little shaky. We weren't really sure like what was going on. Colleagues of mine were either like booking journalism careers or like trying to find other ways to show up and like just get a job. And I fell into that same category. Like my first job was at a law firm, which has nothing to do with journalism. In fact, I was like a junior paralegal, which again
Oh my
has
gosh.
what was I doing? But I will say all of that worked out for the best because I learned so much in my early like years of working at the law firm and ultimately moving to LA and like being part of a startup where I ultimately we was invited to become a co-founder. Like it was just everything was kind of like working out, but like mentally shot. I just wasn't clear about what was happening because it was so much change happening so quickly, but felt kind of slow at the same time. But again, mentally, I just wasn't grounded because I just didn't understand what was happening. And I think there were symptoms of what I now know to be depression, but didn't know what that was at the time, so couldn't quite put a finger on it. And now that I've gotten older, I've recognized that mental health is so crucial to me just showing up and me being myself both professionally and personally. And so I wanted to find ways to integrate that into my professional life. So how can I talk about wellness? If you look at my LinkedIn right now, it says wellness advocate because any opportunity that I have to talk about the need and the necessity of having strong sources to secure your mental health, um, I will advocate for that. Whether that's therapy, formalized therapy, journaling, taking a moment, taking 5 minutes to like do a breathing exercise, or a guided meditation, which we do also have on Hatch Plus. So just different things that you can do to like center yourself because again, mental health is super crucial.
I love that you share that. This is also something that I think that I really struggle with, and anybody that if you are a high achiever, you're somebody that works really, really hard. It's really hard when you have a million goals in front of you. You want to get to them as fast as you possibly can.
Yep.
And for a lot of us, it will end in depression or burnout
Yep.
because your body just physically cannot take it. And if you're not in touch with your body, which is like, which was me, of like my brain and my body were like two separate beings that were not communicating with each other.
At all. Yes. Uh-huh.
And you're not really like taught that. And now I still struggle with it when there's times in Sky Society where I want to grow so fast, see all this opportunity. I'm excited. I want to move. I want to work all these hours, but I know like if I stop grocery shopping for a week and I start eating out, or I miss the workout classes because I'm really busy, or I stay on my laptop or on my phone really late at night. Like I do all these little things and it's gonna slowly end in a not great place.
Yep.
But sometimes you have to learn by like almost hitting that hard place because you can hear all the people talk about it. Like everyone tells you not to go on your not to do these things, but sometimes it's really, really hard. Do you have any advice that you want to like that you would have for someone who like is that really like I'm assuming how you were of like you're a workforce, you're working really hard, but like you have to take the time to also feed yourself emotionally.
Absolutely. I think exactly what you just said, like having a check-in with your body and getting to know your body because it does take time
Yeah.
to like know your triggers. Like, oh, if I start if I start craving junk food, I'm like, oh, it's what's going on? Something's getting weird. Like that sounds like it might be leading to my depressive state. Or if I um stop reading my books, like I love reading. And so if I stop reading, I have no desire to read. It's like, okay, wait, check in, what's going on mentally? But that does take time. I'm actually really pro working extremely hard in your 20s because now that I'm in my 30s, like I see the benefit of how hard I worked in my 20s and I'll just continue to work harder, but not as hard because I did all of that already in my 20s. But I think that you can have all of that drive and hard work and still take care of yourself. And it's a lot of trial and error, like figuring out what works for you, tapping into your body, learning how to take care of your body. I will say too, there are a lot of resources now that weren't available when I was in my 20s because mental health has become more and more popular for people to talk about publicly. So I would say do your Googles. If you have access to therapy, take advantage of it as a benefit. If you don't, I think there's some more like free therapy options that have been offered that I've seen floating around. Check those out and see if that's something that works for you. If not, you can turn on a meditation on YouTube, start there. If meditation is not your thing, because that can be a little overwhelming, like I said, journaling, get a journal, just write out your thoughts, baby steps. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you need to like go on a retreat and like change your life tomorrow. Just like really just check in with yourself and you'll start to figure out what really works for you.
I also love that advice there of checking on like figuring out your own personal triggers because I think we all like at some everyone's is going to be different. Like someone it could be like you said like you're craving junk food, you're craving sweets, you don't normally crave it. You really don't want to go to your workout class. You are finding yourself like drawing to like your TikTok feed way more than normal. I think sometimes we just like brush off those signs of like oh, whatever, like I don't want to go to my workout class, like I'm lazy, versus like it might be because like, oh, you're working too much, like you just you need to like recharge yourself versus like we tell ourselves like, oh, I'm craving this bad food, like and you say like a negative thought about yourself or I'm like yeah, but I think what you're saying there is like they're your body's like signs of something. And the second part is like, okay, if I'm noticing these triggers, how can I recharge myself or how can I help myself? And so
Exactly.
um I think those are like huge, like a huge lesson that I've learned in my 20s that I like really wish that I would have learned earlier.
100%. And you'll continue to learn more and more about yourself. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of like, especially being a woman, like you just learn so much about your body and like when you're feeling this way, what that kind of means and like what this could mean. And it's a beautiful experience, honestly. Enjoy the journey of getting to know. Don't
Yeah.
rush, I would say, because I think
Yeah.
you want the answers quickly, so you might be inclined to rush, but don't rush. Just take your time.
Yeah. But yeah, getting to know yourself, I think, is one of the most powerful tools um, that you can have. Okay, so I also kind of want to talk about like this. I know you mentioned like you study journalism, you're trying to figure out where you wanted to go. You had like a really pretty large stint at We Are Onyx. Can you tell me about this time? Because it seems like this kind of shaped what the rest of your career ended up looking like.
For sure. This is such a fun story because I had just moved to LA, was working like odd jobs, part-time, just trying to figure it out. And I should rewind and say the reason why I moved to LA, partially was because of employment, because I wanted to do something new in a different field that wasn't offered when I was here in Houston. But also just I just needed to get out of Houston. I was like, I need to move. I need to figure out what I'm doing. So I did get a job offer that allowed me to move to LA, but it wasn't like my ideal state of like work. It was just like a way to get out. There was a lot of prayer happening on my end of like, God, are you sending me to LA? And I was encouraged greatly to move to LA through that prayer. And so when I landed there, my best friend was working on set for We Are Onyx. They had already launched the beauty subscription service, and the CEO and founder was like, I need an assistant. And my best friend's like, well, my best friend just moved here from Houston. I would love for you to meet her. So we end up having, I want to say it was like an hour and a half conversation on the phone. Like we instantly just gelled and jammed.
Yeah.
And she ended up hiring me, and I was her assistant. Shout out to Delali. And I was her assistant, and we worked together to build this startup. And we were spending a lot of time, long hours, concepting the business strategy, the fulfillment strategy, the social strategy, the PR strategy, like any part of that business. We all touched, and it was a great experience because I got to have all those various experiences. And I'd say I was performing at such a high level that ultimately she invited me to become a co-founder, which is amazing because I had no intentions on co-founding a business. I really didn't even have a full scope of what exactly that meant until that opportunity. So again, we were formulating how we wanted to show up. At the time, the beauty community as it related to Black women was pretty targeted. It was very it was one way. Beauty boxes were popular. There was one particular bigger beauty box, and most of the products in it, most Black women wouldn't be able to use because the shades were just off. And centered towards a specific demographic. They didn't have Black women in consideration. So it really left the market open for what we were doing. So we had hair care, skincare, and makeup products that we curated every month, partnering with big brands, little brands, Black-owned brands, and that really allowed us to create this community that trusted us to curate um, a monthly experience that they were delighted in every month. So yeah, it was really a really great experience. It taught me a lot about business. It taught me a lot about like Silicon Valley and fundraising. We were fortunate to be accepted into 500 startups, which taught us again, it was an incubator that taught us like how to raise, like what that means, what's a unicorn, like all the terminology that you need to succeed in Silicon Valley. So I consider that experience, I want to say that was 5 years of my 20s. I consider that my MBA. So if anyone's ever like, oh, did you go to grad school? I'm like, kinda, not
I kind of
really.
think a little harder.
Yeah, a little. harder. The stakes were a little bit higher.
Stakes are higher.
Yeah,
Working
but
more hours.
more hours for sure. But yeah, it was a delightful experience all in all. Taught me a
Amazing.
lot.
And then so yeah, We Are Onyx is a beauty subscription
Mhm.
for Black women. So I'm saying this is the time when I never like this is the time when beauty subscription or just like subscription boxes in general were really, really popular.
Everywhere. Yep.
Yeah. So one when I interview my podcast guests, and sometimes when we do this and we go back and we talk about the start of their careers, a
Yeah.
lot will have started at startups. And I feel like yours is like the extreme version of that, that you were not just starting at a startup, but you ended up co-founding it in the end. Can you talk about like if someone is like starting their career and they're like trying to decide if they want to go work at a big company or they want to work at a startup? You mentioned like this was like your 20s education. What would you kind of compare like the pros and cons, or like do you think that working at a startup was worth all that Obviously, I know you learned a lot, but kind of what's your perspective on those like where to kind of work in your 20s?
It's such a great question. I've been asked this before in a different way, and I will say my answer is probably the same. I think there's a lot of discipline that comes from working with a big company, depending on what company you work at. Like they have set in stone like ways of working, which could be really beneficial to teach you how to do a process. Whereas at a startup, where it's particularly with my experience, like we were kind of like figuring it out. Like that was I had worked at the law firm. She had come from a big agency where she was an assistant, but doing some really like big picture assisting, I should say. And so we were just kind of like figuring out. She has an MBA, so she had that kind of like structural educational foundation. But other than that, again, we were just like kind of figure out like processes, like how do you do payroll, like all these little things that we had to like teach ourselves. And so I would say if you're willing to kind of like figure it out, or you know that you have a personality where you're curious and that you want to figure things out and you are down to like build your own foundation, then I'd say startup would be for you. But if you're someone who, you know yourself well enough to know that you want some kind of structure and want something that will help ease you somewhat into corporate America, then maybe like a bigger brand would be the better route. I have since worked at bigger companies, and I would say my startup experience was extremely valuable. But there were things that I had to kind of like learn when I got to these bigger companies, like all these acronyms and like business jargon. I was like, I've never heard some of these words in my life. Like, what are you guys talking about? And so I had to learn. Luckily, I live in the age of Google, so I was able to Google or ask colleagues who I wasn't, embarrassed to ask, like, what does that mean? So yeah, I think it has both have their benefits. You just kind of have to know yourself and know your working style.
Yeah, I know what you want. Yeah.
Know what you want.
And then I'm curious. So you have, I know one thing that we talked about was your passion for like relationships and community.
Yeah.
Um, in this time, because you're doing so much, I'm imagining, for this startup, and then like later you also went on to work for large brands. I know personally when I heard people tell me this of like relationships are important or like grow your community, it really didn't make a whole ton of sense because I was like, well, like I have friends and like I'm working at a job, but like yeah, what does it really mean?
What
So
does
can
that
you talk about
mean?
like what it means to kind of go the extra mile and like prioritize things like relationship and community, and like I know that's important for you and like how you've structured your life.
Absolutely. I believe it was Issa Rae who said this. Like, she really prides herself on networking across. And I think that's super important when building your community. I think we're taught to like go for the top, like talk to the boss to get what you want. But ultimately, you should have a great rapport with your boss, but you should really work on making connections with the people who are at your level. Because essentially you all are there for this like same reason because you're smart and that you think strategically or what have you, depending on the department. And getting to know those people who are doing the work, who are in the weeds with you, could be really beneficial. I've referred people who've worked on teams with me, who I've met through other colleagues who have worked with me. people who I have never like formally met, but just based off the word of some other people have referred. And I think that just enhances your chances of growing your community when you're just making yourself available to that kind of networking. Again, networking across like, oh, she was a strategist when I was a strategist at said company, and now she works here. I wonder if she'll put my name in the hat for this role. Oh, okay, she will. Great. And that's happened numerous times. Again, like I've referred people, people referred me. My name has been, from what I'm told, my name has been in rooms that I've not been in with people that I don't know, just based off of the reputation of my work, but also my community, like really chiming in about who I am and how I show up. So I just think it's really important for you to find ways to expand your community naturally, just like by, again, opening yourself up to talking to people at your level.
Yeah, and then just being curious about other people. I think this is yeah, I think it's like a lot easier. I think I really I'm somebody who is really introverted and really shy, and so I feel like when I looked at people who I felt were like really well networked, or I heard this advice of your network is your net worth, or you hear all these things, it seems really intimidating of
Right.
growing your network can sound really scary, but I think when you kind of approach it the way that you mentioned of just like get to know the people around you, be curious about others, it starts to come naturally. And then your reputation, I think there is something to say with like your hard work will speak for you, but also people have to know what you're doing to be able to speak about you. So you
Got
also
it.
have to be, talking to other people.
Absolutely. Exactly that. Exactly that. Talking to people, talking about the things that you're working on, things that you want to do. That's happened before. Like, oh, I really wanted to work on this thing. And then like someone's like, oh, I know someone there. Do you want me to make the connection? And I'm like, yeah. Just talking. And you're not doing it with the intention to sleuth or like take advantage of anybody. I think that that's also a common misconception of like being afraid that you might come off as like someone who wants to, take advantage of someone, but that's not necessarily the case. You're just honestly just talking and meeting people.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, like I've said that advice just like so many times on the podcast of like if you have a goal, like tell as many people as possible because you have no idea who's gonna be able to help you versus like feeling like you have to keep it to yourself. There's no harm that comes in telling other people. And again, like you never know it's gonna be. And I've had guests again that I've like been like, I got a job at a random party on a random Tuesday because I was telling this person that I was looking for this opportunity and they knew someone like you just never know.
You just never know. You
Yeah.
never know.
The world's special like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so one other thing, I know you started here within beauty, and like this was a
Mhm.
big chunk of your career. And then I know after you went and you did some agency work and you worked with beauty brands, but then you went on to like Lyft, and then obviously now you're at Hatch. Like you didn't stay in the beauty space.
No,
And I know just because I work with so many women that beauty is just such an attractive. Every girl wants to work in beauty or fashion. Like that's the place to be. So can you talk to me about your perspective on different industries throughout your career and like why you decided maybe you will end up back in beauty, but like at least for now, why you are not in beauty?
that's a great question too. Beauty's fun. I love everything beauty. I love skincare. I love makeup. I love hair care. So when the opportunity came for me to join Onyx, I jumped on it because it's something that I loved in my personal life. And I just believed in the alignment. I think that if you have the opportunity to work in beauty and it's something that you enjoy, then you should definitely do it. Not to say that I won't ever go back, but I spent a lot of time in this space and learned a lot. And beauty is also an industry that cycles but also evolves at the same time. Like you'll see the same trends come back, but like in a different way, which makes it intriguing to a certain extent because social is kind of like that too, right? Or we've been doing this, we've been posting on Instagram for years now, but like they find ways to like level it up so then people stay enticed to like be on Instagram. So I see like the parallels between those two industries, as far as like organic, social, and beauty of it all. I will say jumping from beauty to tech, staying within wellness has been fun for my brain and my creativity, just like finding that challenge. Um, can I apply the same strategy that I learned in beauty to tech? Or in the instance where I worked at Lyft, like transportation, does that make sense? Maybe not. Let me find a way to get this same message across and build community, trying different tactics that still ladder back up to my pillars. Like just like nerding out, really, quite
Yeah.
honestly. Just like nerding out across industries and figuring out what works. But specifically when it comes to beauty, I really encourage anyone who has an interest in it to dive into it. You'll learn a lot about yourself and about the different conversations that happen within the beauty industry, the different challenges that some beauty professionals are up against when it comes to marketing beauty. So, yeah, I encourage
Yeah,
it.
I love that. I always think because sometimes I think within industries you can maybe feel like you have to like pick a lane and stay in it, but I think from what I've heard from different guests is it's the same reason they want to change is the challenge piece. So I think that yeah, once you maybe not figure it out, but like you've been in it for a while, it's fun to try to apply it to different verticals.
Exactly.
Um, okay, so going, oh, I was also wanted to ask you, so going through your career and like starting within beauty and then like moving your way up through, you mentioned like you touched on the different industries and then now you're over at Hatch. As you kind of gone through and looked back in your career, what's something that maybe now we've talked about this beginning part that you wish you knew when you first started your career?
Ooh, it's a really good question. Um, I would say, in addition to the mental health piece, like taking care of yourself, I would say it's all gonna work out. Like if I was talking to younger Shia, I would say it's all gonna work out. You are very talented, you're very smart. Um, People will believe that as well. Like you should believe it, and there will be other people who also believe it as well. Just continue to work hard. And I think that as much as like we're told like our whole lives like working hard and it'll pay off, it can it can really be that simple if you're working hard and you're doing things like networking and getting your name out there. It could really benefit you more than you know. I also would say just it's like working hard, figuring out the mental piece of it, but also not being too hard on yourself. I think that when I look back at some of the self-talk that I was doing at the time, because I didn't have the tools to do anything else, I was kind of like, we need to be out there. We need to go harder. What are you doing? And I was really like beating myself up about certain things that I wasn't being more aggressive about. But at the same time, I was kind of depressed, so I didn't have the energy to get out and do it anyway. So it was just like this conflicting battle that was constantly having that I was having with myself.
Mhm.
Um, but I know that that wasn't beneficial to my progress, whether I had the tools or not. Just like positive self-talk and like encouraging yourself to just go for it is enough.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important to hear. And I think hopefully people are that are listening that have felt that way, knowing that like you're not alone and that there is a way through it. And like you said, I think that positive self-talk is so important and so hard, so
It's
hard.
hard. Hard. And I think for me too, I would find myself in the moments when I found the opportunity to talk positive about myself. I feel like I was being cocky. I was like, who do you think you are? Like, why are you talking to yourself like that? But ultimately, it's okay. A, you're talking to yourself. B, you need to feed that back into yourself. Like let yourself know, hey, you you're that girl. Like you got it. Like you're smart. You can do all these things. So I think often if you get too wrapped in being someone who you're not, you'll see a version of yourself being successful and you're like, why didn't I just stay myself? Because that person is very close to who I am, but I was too busy trying to be someone I wasn't and lost the chance to show up as my true self.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah. And even tying back to what we're talking about being authentic with brands, like doing community and building community authentically, that goes back with building your own personal brand in yourself. As if you feel like you have to put on this persona to be successful, you're going to wake up one day and there's going to be a lot of dissonance between who you feel like you are and what others perceive you as.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, super important. Also, you keep mentioning, I also want to ask, because you keep talking about how much you're a marketing nerd, and I love it, and I love hearing how much you're nerding out on it. Do you have
Yeah,
any resources that you love or like creators that you follow where you feel like you get really good insight when it comes to learning things around marketing?
that's a great question. I just read. When I say, and I read like random articles, I read novels. I just find myself reading a lot of different things, like different publications. And that's kind of my best, like when I say I nerd out on like just like reading across verticals. I find it really intriguing. You never know what kind of where insights will pop up. You
Okay, so kind of you're
um
looking for them everywhere. You're just kind of reading everything you can.
I think it's super important for strategists, particularly or creative thinkers in general, to be out in the world and to experience things. Um, if I had my own agency and I had a team of strategists, I would say once a week, we're just gonna go outside and walk around and just like look at the sites and like take it in. I want to say actually, you know what? My previous CMO, Eric, who brought me on to Hatch for one of our off sites, he had us just walking around and I was like, this is my dream. Like just to like do a scavenger hunt and kind of like go to the places where your audience would show up and just like really inhale all of that. Like this is like their daily life, their routine, if you will. Like, okay, they're going to the gym, they're going here, taking it all in. What insights can I build based off this experience? Just like really living in it. And I just love
Yeah.
that. So to
I
answer
think
your
that's
question,
yeah, I
that's
think that's great because I was about to say like I actually like today I was out with a friend at lunch and I'm not like actually working, but I had like a really exciting idea that we were like talking through that I think I'm gonna do for Sky Society, but like I would have never had that idea at my desk. Like I've actually been
exactly.
trying to solve this one problem for months and I haven't been able to solve it and I'm out to lunch and we're talking and I'm like, wait, like would this be the right fit? Um, like you have to get out of your routine.
You have to get out of your routine. And I'm glad you were amongst someone who you could like share your epiphany with. I think that's important too. Just like surrounding yourself with people who even either in the industry or not in the industry, but like don't mind you blurting out random, like, this is how I solve it. My core friends are like, I don't know what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
okay.
It was fun. She was great. She's in marketing too, so we were like talking through it.
Oh, love it.
Um, but like I always think about that too of like I feel like I always get creative ideas. That's why they always like joke about like shower thoughts, right? Because it's like the one time you're not actively trying to think.
Exactly. And it hits you. You're like, oh my gosh, yes,
Mhm.
that is the solve. I would love to hear about other people's resources though, so I'll take a listen to see if anyone else drops some gems about where they get their marketing inspo because I think mine always show up in untraditional places, but I know that there are like some more like traditional versus non-traditional ways that people find marketing insights that I'd love to learn about.
Yes. I'm like, I think honestly, like, everybody is super different. I don't always ask that questions, but you were
Oh,
like
okay.
talking about how much you nerd out on marketing. So I loved it. I feel like I need to ask that question more.
Yeah.
But there was one guest I had on, I'm forgetting her name because I interviewed a while ago, but she was the girl, you know, when Maybelline did their like Sky High mascara campaign, the AI
Hmm.
that like blew up on social media, she was the one behind it. And I was asking her, like, how'd you come up with this idea? Like, or where do you get your creative inspiration? And she's like, I get it everywhere. She goes, whenever I see something that's like, I just think is cool, like, I don't know how it fits into my work, I just take a picture of it and I save it into an album on my phone. And then later, when I'm with my team and we're doing like creative brainstorming, I'll like go through that photo album and I'll look through and like maybe in the moment, I didn't see how that thing like would relate to what I'm doing, but like later on, it comes back and I loved that and I've like tried to emulate that in my own life.
Yeah, I love that too. I think that also comes with just being out in the world too. But I love
Yes,
that idea of, like
exactly.
taking pictures and like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, my last question for you is what's something that you are personally excited about within your own personal like growth in your own life that you are excited for?
That is a great question. What am I excited for? I'm excited for more learning, more growth, again, from a professional and a personal level. Just like once you've fallen in love with yourself, like I have, I think you just learn so much about what you're willing to do and not willing to do, and how that shows up in your personal and professional life. So I look forward to just like leaning into that more. More travel. I love traveling. It's my one of my favorite hobbies. More reading, more
Yeah.
novels. If anyone has any novels they want to send me or nonfiction, I'm open to that as well. But yeah, just more life. Just
More
doing
life.
more life. Yeah.
A perfect ending. I think that ties in with everything. I absolutely love that. This has been so much fun talking to you, Shia. Thank you so much for coming on Marketing Girly and sharing your story. I've had the best time.
Yeah, me too, Natalie. Thank you again for inviting me. So fun.